Hello, how are you?
I'm well. I'm Jess Mookerjee. I'm friends with and she says hello. She'd like to be in here, but she's given me a really cool so I'll put it in the Thank you. We must get growing up like me.
Want to hear it?
But I have been.
I'm on the first top.
That's in budget as well, I can imagine that.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to see so many of you here today, and especially welcome to everybody who's joining us online as well. Isn't it great to be doing something like this again? Welcome to day 3 already. Day 3, gosh, of the 2022 Edward Thomas Literary Festival, which is being held here in the delightful setting of Peaceful Museum and Art Gallery's Old Courthouse. A Victorian courthouse, which was the setting for a criminal case in the early 20th century, which Guy Cuthbertson will reference during his talk on Edward Thomas and the Simple Life this afternoon. Quite a coincidence. It's quite a serendipitous one, I think, as well, but not for the people who were involved in the court case. I would also especially like to welcome, as I say, those joining for the first time today. And for those, my name is Jeremy Mitchell. I am the chair of the Edward Thomas Fellowship and keeper of the Edward Thomas Study Centre here at the Museum and Art Gallery. And that's open during the day today, so after our event, please pop over and have a look around. In addition to the Brunch of Poets we are here for now, both in person and online, today's lineup of events includes Guy's talk this afternoon, followed by the live conversation between poet Sasha Dugdale and Andrew Motion. Now, Andrew Motion is based in the States, so he won't be here physically, but he'll be joining us by Zoom link. But Sasha will be here, and they'll welcome any questions that you have along the way. And then, this evening, we have the annual round table discussion between members of the Edward Thomas Fellowship and members of the Robert Frost Society. And this year, because the focus of the festival is the woodland life, we'll be looking at early Frost and early Thomas, and the connection between the woodland life and his poetry. It's quite interesting. Edna gave a little talk the other evening about the woodland life and how you can start to see those connections, and it's quite a shame that we've kind of forgotten about the woodland life. I suppose it's 125 years old, so we might well have done, but it's well worth another look at. But we're here now for what I anticipate will be the best brunch ever. We're thrilled and delighted with this to welcome this distinguished brunch of poets to the Literary Festival. And a reminder today that your ticket also gives you full access to the exhibitions and displays here at the Museum and Art Gallery, including some wonderful charcoal work and wood carvings in the Floral Report Gallery just the other side of the courthouse here. And as I say, please also visit the Edward Thomas Study Centre and book fair. Many of the poets here today have books that are on sale at the fair, together with prints, note cards, new and second-hand books, and some rare limited editions. We're also thrilled to be selling the booklet that was published following Ellora Sutton's first residency here earlier in the year. It was a 3-month residency, and we called the book 3 Months in Petersfield. But that's available from the museum shop rather than in the book fair. But without further ado, I think we can move on to our readers. We'll each be reading for around 20 minutes. I'll really put them on the spot there. We're dragging value out of and there'll be a short 15-minute break between around 11:15 and 11:30. Might be a bit later than that now because we were a bit late starting. Our first poet today is Kathryn Bevis. Kathryn's going to have to dash off in a minute because She's also reading at the Winchester Poetry Festival later, so we're really, really thrilled that Kathryn has been able to join us today. And apologies if you've heard this already, that Kathryn is a poet and poetry teacher, former Hampshire Poet Laureate, founder of the Writing School Online, currently the selected poet for Magna's Solitude issue, and her poems have appeared elsewhere in Poetry Review, Poetry Wales, Poetry Ireland Review, and the London Magazine. This year she co-won the Martine Crawford Award for Poetry, the Poetry Society members' competition, and was shortlisted for the Bridport Prize. Kathryn designs and delivers poetry courses for vulnerable adults online and in mental health settings, substance misuse recovery settings, and prisons. Very talented. And Flamingo is her debut pamphlet, just published by Seren. Kathryn.
Thanks so much for that beautiful introduction, Jeremy. And yes, this is I think this book was published a week ago, and it's just gone into reprint, so that's really lovely. If you fancy a copy, there are some for sale in the book fair that will happen after this event. But it's just so lovely to be giving it an airing. You know, in an area that I grew up 5 miles away from here. It's just amazing that it's having its first outing here, so thank you. I'm going to start with the apocalypse. Hope that's okay for a Saturday morning. Hopefully things will improve from there. The darkening. It started with glowworms and phosphorescent fish, their lights blown out like candles on a cake. At matinees, footlights swallowed themselves entire, so we only guessed poor Gloucester's eyes were gouged and heard Lear shake his fists against the storm. Momentum took. Bulbs began to organise, to unionise, down tools across the globe. Lighthouse beams refused to stroke the sea to sleep. Whole tower blocks played dead, their pupils blown. By tea time, even the blood-lit freckles of TV standby LEDs had mutinied. Dentist lamps sat down, sat in, called sick. We blamed the manufacturers. We blamed the government. Street lamps picketed the roads on which they lived. We knew we were screwed when matches joined the strike, flints declined to spark, magnifying glasses wouldn't catch. Oil lamps, tapers, flambeaux took up arms. Conspiracy theories had their day at last. Doom scrolling our darkened screens tonight, we are undone. We wait for dawn's red eye to open, watch as stars put out their fires, one by one by one. So I wrote this poem. This next poem is a bit of a revenge poem. Isn't that awful? But I'm sure other poets have done this before me. Caroline Birder talk I went to of hers said that talked about a quotation from Louise Gluck, the current Nobel laureate for literature, and said that poems can be a piece of revenge against bad circumstance, loss, a piece of bad luck. And this one very much falls into that category. The smuggler. She knew she'd need to start off small, so took the spoons. What a boon, easing silver necks from their rosy velvet trays into her tinkling sleeves. He only picked at his guitar with filthy nails, inhaled another toke of weed. Next, she snuck out lamps and lampshades, ceiling roses, bulbs. She stashed them quietly in her boot. What a hoot. He simply frowned, put on his head torch, watched 5 episodes of Top Gear, sucked a 6-pack down. Last week, she slit the curtains from their poles. How droll. Then slid the windows from their sockets, bubble-wrapped the glass and hid their views inside her pockets. He shrugged, pulled on a jumper, filled his bong with grass. Today's his birthday, and she's carried off the roof, the rafters, chimney pot. So what? This time he's shouting at the wind, fists raised to the stars. It's nothing new, this. The fists, the shouting, fists. She's taken it for years. Tonight, she's packed up firelight, shadows, warmth, and headed south. Of all the things she ever took, it was her ma's advice that got her out. She'll reach home soon. Oh, him. Look, he's still there, crouched on all fours, howling at the moon. So I'm going to share a set of 6 more poems, and they're really grouped around a central theme. And they're love poems, most of them actually, but they're also kind of based on an experience I'm dealing with at the moment. I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer back in March. So they're poems about love and mortality, and I hope that's okay for anyone. If that's a topic that's just really dangerous and horrible for you to hear about, I won't be offended if you scoot off for the rest of this set. But as I say, they're also love poems. My body tells me that she's filing for divorce. She's taken a good, hard look at the state of our relationship. She knows it's not for her. The worst thing is, she doesn't tell me this straight up, or even to my face. No. She books us appointments with specialists in strip-lit rooms. They peer at us over paper masks with eyes whose kindness I can't bear. They speak of our marriage in images. A pint of milk that's on the turn, an egg whose yolk is punctured leaking through the rest, a tree whose one rotten root is poisoning the leaves. I try to understand how much of us is sick. I want to know what they can do to put us right. She, whose soft shade I've lain with every night, who's roamed with me in rocky woods, round rocky heads. She who's witnessed the rain pattering on the reed bed, the cut glass chitter of long-tailed tits, the woodpecker rehearsing a single high syllable. How have we become this bitter pill whose name I can't pronounce? Soon she'll sleep in a bed that isn't mine. That's why these nights we practice our trial separations. She, buried in blankets, eyelids flickering fast. Me, up there on, no, wait, through the roof. I'm flying, crying, looking down. Too soon, I whisper to her warm and sleeping form. Not yet. Too soon, too soon. So this next poem really is about a very important person in my life, my lovely stepfather, Ray Holloway, who grew up, again, around here and never left Hampshire. And I think his surname Holloway kind of attests to those beautiful sunken paths that you get so much around here. It's called the Butterfly House. Yours is the only death I've ever known. We sat with you for hours, stroked your hands. And though it was January, the pond a frozen oval, though each blade of grass had etched itself against the ground, and each frail thing had hidden from the stalking frost, a butterfly flew to your window, sudden and strange, with wings that throbbed like a heart. The day we buried you, we saw another. Crimson sails unfurled, its body pretty out to sea. Today's a pilgrimage. I rest in mist and heat. Red lace wings gather their silk skirts as I trace a swallowtail's trembling pulse. Together, apart, together, a pair of blue morphos shiver like black fringed scraps of sky. Clear as leaded panes, glass wings feast on nectar. They close themselves like hands that meet in prayer, then open up again to cup the tropic air. Since my diagnosis, I see them every time I close my eyes. Their flaming wings, their 2 short lives. I'm going to try and put a more hopeful poem in there. I feel like I should bring packs of tissues to read these sometime. This was a poem that came second, I believe, in the Edward Thomas. It was joint second, wasn't it, in the Edward Thomas Fellowship poetry competition that's run every year. Really good competition, poets in the room. It's just called This. A fire has been lit in new leaves, will grow to a green world in the dark wood. Small whites rise in drifts to the swish of our boots. Nothing is worth more than this day. A pair of grey wagtails fly low, gold-bellied over the rushing river. Their bodies translate water to sunlight, sunlight to water. Nothing is worth more than this day. Here, the wind toys with leaves like loose change in the pockets of the sky. High above, a wood pigeon calls to us, wild and true. Who are you? Who? Nothing is worth more than this day. This next one was written, I think, straight after diagnosis, and it's really about, and to my wonderful husband, Ollie, how animals grieve. We Google it, laid on our backs in bed together, cursed by our tired 3-pound brains. We search our phone's blue light for wisdom, become voyeurs of YouTube clips on other creatures' pain. For 17 days, a mourning orca attends her dead son's corpse. She sinks and hauls the weight of him, as if to fetch the breath back, have him suckled once again. A chimp will carry her lifeless child for months. She lets the troop draw close to hear her, to hold her, hear her screech. They watch her comb the straw from listless fur and floss with grass between its teeth. Elephants know to sniff beloved bones. They seek to raise the fallen, rock their own bulk back and forth. Each one waits its turn to stroke and roll the skull, slow blow through its trunk, take time to bury its dead. Like us, giraffes and housecats, dingoes, horses, dogs, forget to forage, forego sex and sleep. Like us, at burial mounds, they pace and yowl and keen. So why should it surprise us, Ollie? Us whose marriage is as deep as marrow. Why this loss unthinkable? Me without you, you without me. One of the things I've been really obsessed with doing at the moment is going to the zoo and watching wildlife documentaries. So I think really what I'm trying to do is find a way of talking about cancer and mortality without using vocabulary to do with war and fighting and being a soldier and a trooper and a brave person and all that stuff. I know that's really helpful for some people, so I'm not dissing that at all, but it hasn't been helpful for me. So trying to find this new language I found animals actually been really useful way in. My cancer is a ring-tailed lemur. We both know one day she'll eat me. But for now, we dance. A little game of catch me if you can. Tracking her is difficult, but specialists are interested, and bit by bit they creep inside my body's forest. take images, write reports. On ultrasounds, she's punk rock stripes of white and black. On mammograms, she sunbathes, downy as a dandelion gone to seed. The child I am divines the time by glowing. 5 years, 10 years, 20 more. That's when they spy her, up in the canopy. Her tail, Rapunzel's flat, looped round a single sentinel nose. Now, on MRI, they spot her kindly spaniel's face, crammed into the lettuce of my breast. At last, on PET CT, they catch her on the move. She's up and off all right. A lope, a leap. She careens through my branches, omnivorous for bone and liver, brain. The child I am learns to prophesy afresh, blows 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5. Friends say this is war, and I'm a warrior, tower of strength. But the lemur and I get on okay. I figure she has a right to be here. She is, in some important sense, endangered too. I draw the line at poisoning, but let the hunters starve her most days. She looks at me with orange eyes of ire as we witness our habitat's destruction. My new need for naps, my breathlessness, for both of us, a forest fire. Before I read this last poem, I just want to say thanks again so much to the Edward Thomas Fellowship, to Petersfield Museum for hosting us in this amazing space, and thank you, deep thanks for that. Flamingo. My love, when I die, I'll turn flamingo, face tucked in on the pillow of itself. Even as you cry, I'll be stepping from the bed, feeling plush pink tulle tutuing from my hips. My legs will telescope, grow thin and rosy. I'll sense my feet web, feel a new itch to stamp and stir, to suck up larvae from the bottom of the lagoon. In this afterworld, some days I'll fix 1 foot in mud, find infinite repose, the poise of a yogi in prayer. Others, I'll gorge myself, filter feed on brine shrimp from the salty shadows. The other birds and I will grunt and growl over the choicest cuts, like churchwomen bickering over rosettes for jam at a country show. My love, do you know that the dead all flock together? We meet at the saline lake, dance our shuffle-legged shimmy, flick our heads like tango partners, flag and flap our scalloped wings, heads bopping, nodding to the beat. Do you see? After the illness, the grief, the pain, as you will do, sweetheart, the dead must learn to love again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. Those are very brave poems, and yes, we talked about flamingos, and both of us had backgrounds in Kenya, so it was quite relevant to me that poem. And Kathryn also mentioned the Edward Thomas Fellowship Poetry Competition. The 2023 one is live now, and if you look on the Edward Thomas Fellowship website, you can find a link to entering. It's there is a small fee, £3 per poem, maximum 3 poems per poet, and the only stipulation really is that they're not previously published poems. So, if you want to have a go, you're more than welcome. And if you want to have a look at previously winning poems, we do have anthologies of the last 6 years from the poetry competition. There are 2 anthologies. We've got them over in the study centre. You can just have a browse, or if you wanted to buy them, they've got the judges' reports in there as well from each year, so you start to get a feel of what they're looking for. So, Kathryn, thank you for the nudge. Otherwise, I would have forgotten to say that. I'd now like to introduce Yvonne Reddick. Yvonne is a poet, scholar, and nature writer, author of Ted Hughes, environmentalist and eco-poet, and a forthcoming publication from Blood Axe next year, Burning Season. Yvonne has spoken before digitally at a previous festival, so it's lovely to have her live here today. Yvonne.
This is wonderful. Well, thank you for inviting me. I was saying to people yesterday that they've been so generous to me. I've been invited on an Edward Thomas themed hike tomorrow. I grabbed my waterproofs, I grabbed my walking boots. I don't know that I'm even going to need the waterproofs. Absolutely gorgeous day that we're having today. I'll read you some sort of environmental and nature poems. I'll read you a few things that probably have something to do with climate change as well. I think you can definitely see the influence of Edward Thomas's The Comb on this poem that I'm going to start with. Do you remember that gorgeous line about the badger, that most ancient Briton of English beasts? Well, you'll hear that a little bit in my poem about ptarmigan. Even their eyelids are feathered, that most high Arctic of British birds, that cry, that clacking of pebbles. Beakless and unclawed, we needed picks, crampons, soft shells, and 4 pine logs crackling in the grate at Curran. In December, a scouring wind on the Devil's Point sent us scurrying for the Rock of Tailors, named for the 4 caught out in the blizzard. New Year, and the burn is in spate. Ladies' mantle unfurls, and gnats swither from hollows between ponders. But those Ice Age refugees require weather from beyond the north wind, a snow cloak to outfox the eagles. There they huddle in a melting drift. Step too close and they burst into flight, a snowstorm towards the angels' peak. I got my love of hiking and walking from my late father, who was mountain mad and would drag us out in all weathers. And I used to complain about the mud. I hated the midges. It was exhausting. I grew to love it as an adult. I think it's a sign of the onset of middle age, actually, that I know that. And I guess this is a family poem, really. It's about his frequent attempts to get me to do the navigation. The flower that breaks rocks. He introduced Ben Nevis to his daughters. You take the bearing, line up the arrow, pointing to Moonlight Gully buttress, -1 gully. We didn't care. Until Dad found us a saxifrage. Its blooms were spokes of the North Star. Saxifrager means rock breaker. Nivalis, snow saxifrage. Dainty alpinist, chinking her roots into fissures and fractures like crampons in toeholds. But I see now what he could only glimpse. That she and the other alpines, rose roots and pearlwoods, are scrambling skywards until all that remains for them is cloud. I kept complaining to all of my friends during lockdown that I couldn't go out anywhere. I was stuck in the middle of the city. I was lucky in that I could go to the park. I know not everybody could get out of their house. I was desperate to get to the Peak District. I wanted to go up on the Kinder Plateau, and I wanted just to have the freedom to roam around again. That was the place that I wanted to be, and it was the place of hallucination, I swear, when I was sitting at my desk delivering lectures on Zoom and just endlessly trying to email people who were all sort of panicking because the virus was going on, and it was a very, very weird time. There's a particular rock on the edge of the Kinder Plateau that has this hole right the way through. You can peek through and you can look down the whole valley through it. And the tour in the title of my poem, Dear Tour, is that particular rock. Dear Tour, I've been away a year, Tour. I've needed your grit, the blink of light and the fissure at your heart. Tour, those were the months the city shuddered. Breath was taxed, air was weaponized, locks clicked their steel tongues shut, stayed mute. Goldfinches on the building site, mushrooms infested the wood panels on my balcony, moss rioted an underfoot forest, bird's nest fern and hearts tongue by the potted lettuce, squadrons of flies. I need heather honey air, Tour. I need the rainy breezes, I need water. Give me your sedimentary, patient endurance. The wind breathing in you, the same view down the valley for millennia. Rain laving you, moor grass feathering your chin, bilberries springing at the corner of your eye. Tour, years stream from your back, you who remember when this rain-licked upland was estuary, when the edges sailed at the equator and land was wave. Tour, give us time. This one's fairly new. I've been writing sequences and sequences of tree poems, so I was very excited about the theme of the festival this year, actually. This one's called Fire Seed. Saplings in neck braces, infant willow, oak fledging into leaf. Their roots have hit the quarry's midden. You hawthorn, the delicate cling of your spines. Little northerners, you'll keep your first winter close in a dark band. But hornbeams will outlive 6 kingdoms and weather 60 governments. For you can remember doomsday. The land's hollowed edge. You trees are the only children I can bear to watch growing tall. They're letting me loose in the physic garden a bit later. I'm very excited. I'm chuffed that I'm going to be able to run a writing workshop there, and it's really fun for me as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody is going to write. And the poem that I suppose has seeded this is Aspens by Edward Thomas. All day and night, save winter, every weather above the inn, the smithy and the shop, the aspens at the crossroads talk together of rain until the last leaves fall from the top. Out of the blacksmith's cavern comes the ringing of hammer, shoe and anvil. Out of the inn, the clink, the hum, the roar, the random singing, the sounds that for these 50 years have been. The whisper of the aspens is not drowned, and over lightless pane and footless road, empty as sky, with every other sound not ceasing, calls their ghosts from their abode. A silent smithy, a silent inn, nor fails in the bare moonlight or the thick-furred gloom, in tempest or the night of nightingales, to turn the crossroads to a ghostly room. And it would be the same were no house near. Over all sorts of weather, men and times, aspen must shake their leaves, and men may hear, but need not listen more than to my rhymes. Whatever wind blows, while they and I have leaves, we cannot other than an aspen be, that ceaselessly, unreasonably grieves, or so men think, who like a different tree. So you've got another long nature poem to finish. This one's got a few different voices that come into it. I wrote it because I used to live in Cambridge, and that's quite a weird place for somebody who likes hills to live. A mate of mine once went to the Gogmagog Hills with his rope and his ice axe and a load of his mates, and they posed as the Gogmagog Hills Mountain Rescue Team, a few metres above sea level. And for years, my dad would tell me with absolute glee that all of East Anglia was going to be underwater in 50 years' time anyway. So it was pointless for me to go and live there. Yeah, his ghost, usually, telling the usual dreadful jokes, pops up in this poem, which is called Waterland. There is steel pike in Jesus' ditch, the length of 3 finger joints, quicker than dactyls. Gone, before you can say Jack Pickerel. Drowned land, drained land, where earth is silt and blood and river, fen Dittons stippled with pools, Milton's vocal reeds. City built on water, don't you know the wash is inching closer? Everything swayed by the way of water, both path and walker. A drift of apples drips from a tree. Hazelnuts flow past on the water's skin. Nutshell nasals channeled to its brim. Flash of a flank, the surface speaking circles. A bargeman on the far bank plays blues from a distant delta. If it keeps on raining, the levee's gonna break. George Gordon stabled his mare in the meander meadow. They swam, naked and unsaddled, watched by yellow irises. Along the bank, he walked a bear. His pool is jammed by a concrete weir. When the levee breaks, Mama, you gotta move. What could do, Rona, Mira? I'll grab a beer. Cassie, read my chart. I'm better with cards. You irrational hippies. Have you ever heard of probability theory? Shh! She needs to concentrate. You've drawn the moon. Watch for undertows and tide rips, the lake's skin of ice. The junction by the parade's already underwater. Names become watercolour. Swavesey, Fenstanton, Waterbeach. Past fly tips, brambles and fields cropped by shearlings, I swam in spring fish rise through reed-collected water. The arches spoke, echoes, A damselfly nymph shed its wings, its skin on mine and dried its wings, but autumn found a drowned man floating where I'd swum. If I ever reach the head of the river, I'll raise a glass to my father's ghost, out there on the freezing Isis, his crew plying 8 blades. Pull! Like you're pulling a toady off your granny! What it takes to make a mountain man leave his home. Water Crowfoot City, willow roots in your cellars, city of Daphnia, winter coughs and vials disease, slow city, jade vine city, your fellowship of swans and munsjack. We stopped dead at a giant bronze hare. It stood in the garden of a dissolute pier. My man said he wished he trespassed over the boundary fence and pissed. Ely's belfry sails on wetland mist, eel isle, culverts of fish poachers and fag nets. My friend Eli tracked an eel and kept her till she silvered. She was thirsty for salt, slipped her tank and slithered back to her sea-road river. Each eel an ell of Atlantic. Going down, going down. Winter nights when the granter can't rest in its bed, casts its coverlet across the meadows, floats over the orgasm bridge as mist, sleepwalks in the courts. Old stream who hushed me when the horizon seemed to capsize. When the levee breaks, mama, you gotta move. Streets of dumpster foxes and essay crisis, from Cam Causeway to Mariner's Way, town of smashed bottles, chucked bike tyres, cluttering Bin Brook. The North Sea remembers its channels, and you, City of Rivers, will need to weather it. The skeleton whale in the Zoology Museum back in its element. Darwin's fossil sea lilies stretching their stone tendrils. Carved griffins sprout gills and algae. The fellows of Bradbrook College sit at high table in an underwater dome. A library sails between clock towers, mooring where it's needed. Old waterway, bless me in outwash, reed roots, ground glass, sets me adrift surrounded by grave roots. A hair clip, china cups, leaves of a tea bush for these roaring northern latitudes. When your willow meanders roll under the seabed, a woman will pan the dredge's silt for lithics and bone splinters. The sediment will birth cracked tankards, bottle caps, a shucked-off ring now tarnished, the broken urn of my parents. My fragments will lie in a vitrine in the floating museum, with coin boards, scabbard checks, the last fenment bitten. May rang, told me she was carrying a girl. She kicks and pivots in her waterbed, passenger voyaging towards the light. Tell me some strong female names. When the levee breaks, mama, you gotta move. My sister's children's children will weigh anchor, sleep over the waves, hunt under them, raise fish, graze kelp, their voices remembering gills. They'll listen for whales in the shell of the ear. Carina in the sea sky, pray for us. Capricorn of slow nights, lead us. Vela, grant us a following wind. Cetus of the depths, uplift us. City setting scale, barge and tarpaulin town. When the levee breaks, the meadow's seagrass, going down, octopus in the undercroft, barnacles on skylights, when the levee breaks. During storms, the bells of keys and queens still ring beneath the water. Going down, your children plotting courses for all points of the compass. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Yvonne. Oh, I'm not going to Cambridge. I love that bit at the beginning of your first poem with the connection with the spokes of the North Star. This is so much imagery in your poetry. Thank you very much. And I'd now like to introduce Daljit Nagra, who is also a veteran of our festival and a great supporter of other events that we've put on. In his spare time, he's published 4 poetry collections, all with favour and favour. He's Professor of Creative Writing at Brunel University. He's Chair of the Royal Society of Literature and presents the weekly Poetry Extra on Radio 4 Extra. And all that as well as being a brilliant poet. So, Daljit.
We read a couple of years ago together, didn't we, Ron, at the Zoom one?
Yes.
Thank you for that, Jeremy.
Yes.
And thank you for inviting me back. Lovely to be here. I hope you can all see me. We're talking about terrible jokes. It's only going to get worse for him. I mean, I'm sure I do. I guess one of the things I like about this festival is it's named after a poet. There should be some sort of law where all festivals, all competitions, all prizes should be named after poets, so we remember them instead of cities and.
The Daljit Prize.
That's just a really good idea. So thank you for that, Jeremy. Brilliant. I was going to start with playing about the British Empire. I don't know why. It's quite noisy, but I'm going to really calmly. It's my second collection. I was just really thinking about the kind of in between children and what that meant. And this, in the case of this poem, I mentioned goodies, as in Punjabi we say girls, goodies. And kind of those illegitimate children of the empire. And the Indians didn't want them because this one's cursed, and the English didn't want them. So that kind of, I'll touch on that at the end here. And it's just about the leisure of the empire, particularly the British men and the British Empire out in India. And it's just a chance to recover language, excitement of language, I guess. So, yeah, hopefully it just will show you. I'm not sure if you know some of the words. If you do, great. But I'll just call it, this be the pucker verse. Great, a reference already. The Raj, our mother incarnate, Victoria Imperatrix, rules a sceptred sphere, overseeing legions of maidens, fishing fleets that break the waves to net the love of a heaven Etonian. Fates on lawns with mansion whacking banks, or dances by moonlight at the Viceroy's ball. The Barakrum Bara pegs of brandy barney and pink gin, and toddy to do lally flappings on Jaldi Pankawala for 6 meal days, including tiffin with humps and peacocks and tongue. The lock, stock and bobbing palanquins for summers on Gothic verandas, where dawn Himalayas through Pubong or Uti mist for housey and hammocks under the Milky Way. Tally-ho in topi of khaki with swagger stick for bobbery shikars. And by Amritsar, what a 12-ball Hollis Howder from Howders for bang bagging photogenic tigers, panthers, leopards, blackbucks and bustards. And Kipling or Tatler to hand at Tollygunge. The rum-twirling, sabre-curved mustachios, lavish zananas behind bazaars with a fruity hookah for the breathless Nodge. The Nodge that leads to ayahs and passerby goodies snookered for sahib sport that ends in the hushed-up bestie births of half-breed bastards growing up cursed as mad dogs and vagabonds, in a jolly good Lingham land, overflowing with hops and jobsons of holly and opium and spice and silk and all the gems of the shafted earth. It's a throat cleanser. Actually, I'm going to read. It's great, lovely to be following Kathryn and Yvonne as well. And Kathryn mentioned marriage as a kind of deep-rooted as the marrow, didn't she, in one of her poems? Which made me think, I'm going to read my poem about the bitterest vegetable known to us. And I used that as a love poem for my wife, Kathryn. And it's called Karela. I don't know if you've ever had Karela.
Yes.
You have? Wow, it's rare, isn't it? You don't get it in Indian restaurants, do you? No. Or I'll call it, Indian, Bengali, Pakistani. It's a proper under the counter. You have to be properly and was it tasty or disgusting?
You had to prepare it in a special way.
And even then, it has that really vomity smell, doesn't it? Which like when I was a kid, I used to find it disgusting, and over time I came to like it. It's you wouldn't have it by itself really. You might have like a lentil curry, sort of slightly milder curry, maybe yogurt, various things. It's probably the best way to have it. But I'd highly recommend it. But you're right, it's very difficult to cook, isn't it? And it's just it's kind of gourd, and it looks quite disgusting, doesn't it, as well? So I wrote it as kind of, this sort of poem about, it's a love poem for my wife, I guess. But no, it doesn't really come across that way. It was meant to. So I thought all the nice things being written about, roses and all these other fruits and vegetables and nature, so I thought I'd pick Karela. And I guess in the end I'm talking about the bitterness of the empire, but also my parents weren't happy with Kathryn. They still can't say her name. We've been together nearly 20 years, I think. So it's very difficult. Anyway, I don't care. I moved on from them when I was a kid, so I don't mind. So it's called Kathryn. Oh, so it's called Karela, for Kathryn. Yeah, Karela. Gourd, grenade-shaped, ochre green. I prize each limb of warty flesh, disembowel each indigestible red seed memory of regal pomegranate. This dish from my past, I recall Mum would embalm the innards with amalgam of fried onion to gum the snarled temper. Mummy bound with string for a mustard popping pan, then sealed. Masala creeps. Karela, ancient as crocodile. No matter, I kiln crisp each skin for ages, proudly before my English lover. When the lid comes off, each riven body shriveled, yet nerve-fisted and gnarled, blackening centuries of heat, with a feedback of sizzling smoke and wog, rescinders stoking my mind with inedible historical fry-ups. The rebel ethic of our ethnic gumbo. Hail to the king of bile, as I bite a mean mouthful, swamping me down to the tracts of my roots. My body craves taste of home, but is scalded by shame of blood desertion that simmers in me unspoken, save that we are in love, that you bite as well your mind with Karela curses, requited knowledge before our seed can truly bloom, before our tongue is pure poppy. Thank you. I know he's desperate to get out there and find some Karela now. Where did you find it, by the way?
It was in the supermarket, and my friend Vedita wanted to show me how to cook it, so we cooked it.
And where was that, in Cambridge?
No, that was Leamington Spa. It tasted weird.
Yeah, because I live in Harrow, which is very sort of mixed. There's quite a lot of Indian, sort of Hindu background, sort of Sikh background. But one or two of the fruit and veg places sell them.
It's very good for diabetes.
Yes, it's basically the best vegetable for diabetes, isn't it? Do you reckon that's true or just a myth?
I think it's true.
Is it? Just because it's so bitter?
Just because it's horrible.
So it just scares the diabetes. Terrifies diabetes. Okay, I'm going to read a poem, Ode to England, I'll call this one. And at the end I was thinking about cartoons. When I was a kid, I was born near Heathrow. My parents from the countryside of Punjab. So I didn't speak any English as a child. My mum wasn't educated at all. My dad had a bit of education, and they worked in the factories there. So I just remember watching cartoons, and these two words would appear at the end of the cartoons. And I used to think there must be some magical power to those words. And I used to write them out by hand, and it was the end. And I used to think it must be part of the joke, because that's the only word. Anyway, so I just referred to that here. And I guess in this poem I was trying to telescope, go move forward and close as I sort of observe Englishness. And I grew up in sort of a place called Useley, between Heathrow Airport and Uxbridge. I don't know if any of you know that area. And we used to have a Lipton's, a Baker's, all that stuff, because I'm 55 now, so I remember that old world well. And it's a very different world, that, isn't it, from my kind of early 70s. So all those traditional shops, I guess I mentioned a bit of that. So I don't know if it's a kind of parody poem, or, a lot of my kind of this British Museum has sort of parody kind of voices. Anyway, it's called Ode to England. There was a time on your island of the spires when I was a child in the clouds with no inklings, my fingers woven and raised to the language which came from the cuckoo on our roof, over which my sounds were the hollow of its Indian cousin, the kokila. England, your scrannel songs were greetings from paperboy to whistling postman to bowler hat, who nodded to boiler suit. The click laughs and mumbles I mimicked in my mirror, my hand upright as a gentleman to fake the high notes as roar, roar, or croak, fleur. Even your fogs, your ogre trees gargling in our garden would make me climb our slanted coal hole. My arms wide as the eagle of the gods Garuda, I jumped down from the garden's midriff for the mound under which there was a bunker we lit with cedarwood. Was I invisible? I was gripped behind railings for each devotional ball which the boys chased with plunder cries. I'd swoon at the grown-ups who rolled gloss bowls within high hedges. From each the orts of conquest and loss, propelling forth tussocky clacks. You were the sepia monarch of the world, who steered our canal, which I thought came off the Himalayas and curved for a cannibal born. The boats stroked by dangling leaves and steered by bare-chested tattoo men, whose pipes smoked past the factory whistle. Oh, England, I'm left to summon your golden days, a brillig of bonbon and sherbet awnings for butcher, baker, Liptons, the lanes wafting Yorkshire puds with gravy that called home brownies and cubs, while allotment dads knelt to pluck, like flowers, the first green sarg of spring. Though the sky was ever blue as a Hindu god, my joys and desires were soon behind doors. I double watching cartoons on the screen that stilled on two words I knew were a spell I'd shape with my fingers before I learned to read and read the end. Thank you. I'm going to finish with an Edward Thomas poem, but before I do that, I've written a few institutional poems, a really long one, British Museum, a long one about the Globe and Shakespeare and Britishness, and quite a long one about the BBC. So I'll read my third section of this, and hopefully it kind of makes sense in context. So imagine, the BBC looks like a ship, doesn't it? If you look at it above. So I was thinking of it as a ship. In the third section, I refer to Piers Plowman, the medieval poem, and I guess the BBC's World Service, kind of, it's like middle floor. And it's really interesting, to me, I find it interesting because you kind of go, it's very white beneath and very white above, and there's this sort of chocolate layer. And it's, you can smell the kind of traditional dishes, and it's, people from around the world. It's really interesting. So I'll sort of mention that. And I'll talk about the piazza at the end, that amazing piazza we've got there. In this, so what's the poem? I'm getting my name. Broadcasting House. And it's the third section. There is a ship of man that becomes a ship of the world in Piers Plowman. There, the waters are wealth through which a vessel rides. The fortune of a vessel lies within the rise and fall of the waves. Our house is a vessel that's geared to sift the waves, the fortune, and so broadcasts the worldly profit and loss. I watch a portion of this strain from the building's upper floor, a United Nations of tongues. One desk is all Bogota, another labelled Central Western Asia, on a deck that never sleeps. From their channels, they present an unvarnished version of home to home. Does our service prove we're preserved in order to signpost each dodgy globocop, each demagogue? To write the Bobby's report, although the Bobby's under mask and is filling his boots? What of our own estate? How do we build a new being? Could we update our failed and mural customs? Become the ploughman who ascends the hill of battles with ideals? Could we shed bias, armed with knowledge, conscience, to fight for a steadfast voice? And accept that to stay at sea is to stay at home, and not bully for John Ball or the tea cake vistas of Betchman, straddle the centre and not become anodyne, to serve and be served by our house. Inside and out along the piazza, our house is awash with the sounds of our island, an autopilot of accord and retort, no longer replenished by ourselves. As we diminish or implode, are we doomed to look back at the dream that fell from the airwaves, this craft of the national mind, this tower of truth, this Roman forum, this thoroughfare of modern Britain, this gilded world, this happy field of people. It's a very short one. I'm going to read this because I was so inspired by Suella Braverman's speech the other day, and how she talked about her dream, her little fancy, that one day on the front page of the Telegraph would be photos of aeroplanes taking refugees to Rwanda. That is some wet dream indeed to have. Yeah, quite shocking, isn't it? Anyway, so this is, I wrote this a long time ago, and I was thinking of Sangap, the detention centre at the time. Some of you have seen those photos over a decade ago when migrants were treated so badly, they treated like prisoners, and their protest, their silent protest, was to stitch up their own eyelids and to stitch up their own lips. And there were some photos of that a few years ago. You know, just anyway, I just thought this. It was meant to be a skipping rope song, a very dark, sick skipping rope song. 10 lines, it's called X. I knot my tongue, I nail my lips, I zip my lids, and still you say, I say you harm. You hook my arms, you hood my head, you lose my legs, and still you say, I say you harm. Okay, I'm just going to finish with an extract of a poem, and then I'm going straight into Edward Thomas one. I'm going to attempt to segue. So I'll read just the first verse of this poem. It's much longer, but I'll just read the first verse and I'll go straight into Edward Thomas. And this one is called The Man Who Would Be English. Just for kicks, I was well in with the English race. My skin matched the beef of their ruddy skin, as one by one, a walk-in sing-along of familiar faces from the larkabout days of school chucked back chunks of smoke to reveal their manhood. I shouldered the bulk as they broadened their brick houses to broadly take me in. We plundered up gulps of golden rounds for the great game. United at our local, we booed at the mountain screen at the face of the anthemed foreigner when we were at home. Then we chanted with heart and soul for God and Queen. On that goes, and I'll just read one I particularly enjoy, Home. Some of you may know. Often I had gone this way before, but now it seemed I never could be and never had been anywhere else. 'Twas home, one nationality we had, I and the birds that sang, one memory. They welcomed me, I had come back that eve somehow from somewhere far. Familiar, meant the same thing familiar and pleasant to us, and strange too, yet with no bar. The thrush on the oak top in the lane sang his last song, or last but one. And as he ended on the elm, another had just begun his last. They knew no more than I the day was done. Then passed half with weariness, half with ease, and through the silence from his shed, the sound of sawing rounded all that silence said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daljit. Wow. Cucurella. I'm not sure about it. But what a lovely mix of cultures and memories and Britishness you bring in there. And I mean, talking about the BBC World Service, I mean, that is something that we must hold on to. I know every now and again there are talks of cutting it and such like, but it is something that we do need, we must hold on to. And I suppose I could finish by saying the end, but it's the end of the first half, and so we'll have a 15-minute break now, and please help yourselves to coffee and cakes and all the other lovelies there, and I'll see you again in about 15 minutes. Doing really good on time. Thank you, everybody.
1900, I think. So it's Win the Moon League, which is 1899.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. For those who aren't sat down, so welcome back, Brunch, and I'm sure the second bit is going to be equally as good. And we're going to start with Ellora Sutton, who's an award-winning Hampshire poet and museum person. Her work has been published by the Poetry Review, Young Poets Net, amongst others. She reviews poetry for MS Lexia and Poet in Residence. Earlier this year, she was Poet in Residence here at Petersfield Museum and Art Gallery, a role which she'll be excited to reprise shortly for another stint. And is delighted that her poems and essays from her earlier residence have been curated into this beautiful booklet, 3 months in Petersfield, which is available at £7.99 from the museum shop. Ellora's debut pamphlet, All the Shades of Grief, was published by Nightingale and Sparrow in 2020, and her next pamphlet, Antonyms for Burial, is out later this month, and in my mind is definitely one of our rising.
Hi, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I'm going to start actually not with a poem. I'm going to start with a quote from Helen Thomas, Edward Thomas's wife. When I was doing my earlier residency, I spent a lot of time sort of cosily wrapped up in Edward Thomas and Helen Thomas' brilliance, like works, books, letters, in the wonderful Edward Thomas Study Centre, which is out in the courtyard. I really recommend having a look in there. It's just an amazing resource. But I loved Helen Thomas's writing, and her letters especially. I think they are quite poetic. There's definitely poetry in them. And I'm going to read an extract from a letter that Helen wrote to Edward in November 1911. How am I to you? Your eyes and mine. Good night, sweetheart. It's a still night, but oh, it's far away from you. Farewell. If you ever smile when you think of me, well, that's lovely. But do you? Answer all these questions. Good night. So yeah, I love her letters. So as part of my residency, I wrote a sequence of sonnets, a crown of sonnets. I say sonnet, 3-verse sonnets, they have 14 lines, it's all good. They're a crown, so the last line of each poem is the first line of the next one, and so on. And for these interlinking lines, I decided to use quotes or paraphrase quotes from Edward and Helen, so it would be sort of a little bit like they were talking to each other. If you can spot those quotes, then you know, gold star all around. So I'm going to read a few of those sonnet-ish poems, and this is the third poem in the sequence, and it is called Camera Roll. The blossom is foaming, downloading the sun's glitchy interface, a distant algorithm. Lapwings. Did you mean, is the sky over a field also the field? Or is it in the field, like a sheep or flock of sheep? And doesn't the moon have better places to be at 3 p.m. on a Sunday? I take 64 photos of the blossom, falling through the 5G to show her, the lane heatsick, my shadow a mistranslation, my anemone maiden. And this is the fourth poem in the sequence called Guide to Worshipping a Minor Rustic Deity. Tell me I am your anemone maiden, your entire south, a daughter of the sun, the moon a shrine to my mouth. Tell me I am a song of many hidden birds. You have been leaving offerings of fresh watercress in chaffinch nests for me again. Tell me I am about the business of eternity, a perfect example of a meadow where a church once stood. I was born to be a great river. Say you believe me. My name means light in one ancient tongue, and an untranslatably vague yearning for freedom in another. Tell me there is no such thing as a dead language. I make you hungry for the sky. You didn't realise until later what you had done, how your spirit was waiting in the dark. 5. Saved to drafts. My spirit waits in the dark, and it doesn't always come when you call. You call me my anemone maiden, and that's lovely. But do you smile when you hit send? And I know it's time you want growing on your grave, and I can't give you your self back. And I've never understood what's meant by God or rock rose, love. Hold me like this, the way willow herb holds sunlight and water. I don't mean it like a poet when I say the moon is my closest neighbour. And I'm going to skip forward a little bit in the sequence there to the 7th sonnet, and it's called What I Have Learned So Far. Ghost moths have been weaving my hair again. Perhaps they can taste the moon on me. I love the theory that says we are all just the universe's way of translating itself into something legible, and I am shorthand for potential, a cocoon of metamorphosing light. Everything is poetry in its mother tongue. The rain said it first, and better. The blossom said it first, and better. The road signs said it first, and better and better. The moon knows I'm a flawed medium. I want to write bright, irrelevant things, an orchard of misremembered autumns. But the past is the only dead thing that smells sweet. And I'm going to read my favourite, if I can have a favourite Edward Thomas poem, it's quite hard to pick. But if I notes on what the wild birds say by Edward Thomas. She dotes on what the wild birds say, or hints or mock at, night and day. Thrush, blackbird, all that sing in May, and songless plover, hawk, heron, owl, and woodpecker. They never say a word to her. She cries at them for carelessness, who see her going loverless, yet sing and chatter, just as when he was not a ghost, nor ever ask her what she has lost, or what is the matter. Yet she has fancied blackbirds hide a secret, and that thrushes chide because she thinks death can divide her from her lover, and she has slept, trying to translate the word the cuckoo cries to his mate, over and over. So, as Jeremy mentioned in his very, very kind introduction, I have a pamphlet coming out in a couple of weeks from 14 poems called Antonyms for Burial. And I was working on some of these poems probably around the same time, or I certainly would have been editing them around the same time that I was, really sort of saturated in Edward Thomas. And when I was coming up with the set list for this reading, I had put in that previous Edward Thomas poem, and I thought there's a poem that sort of really chimes with or speaks, or my poem speaks to in my pamphlet, so I thought I'd read that one, and it's called Collective Noun for Birds. I think I am really an aviary, masquerading as a girl. My heart is a wood pigeon. Sometimes I have a swim bladder, and that is a challenge. The gulls are restless. They go wherever greediness is. My knees, the back of my neck, somewhere over my lungs, a heron. I start seeing an ornithologist. She feeds me sunflower seeds and pistachios. Warm breadcrumbs from her butter knife shows me the shapes required for flying. I ask her what will become of the loose net of my body when half or more of the birds want to migrate. She says she doesn't know, but she'd love to observe. She says, a beautiful sky, I'd imagine. This next one's a newer poem, and it's called Cottagecore AU. So cottagecore, if you don't know, is sort of a trend, very sort of Instagram, TikTok, where sort of people want to live essentially like cozy little cottagey lives. You know, sort of go back to sort of this idea of the good life and wear sort of like knitted jumpers and go out picking pumpkins and things like that, which is amazing. And AU is a term used in fan fiction, short for alternate universe, so the imagined, usually impossible or improbable world outside the character's usual realm of existence. So you might see, I don't know, the cast of Star Trek running a coffee shop in New York or something. So this is called Cottagecore AU. You enter through the kitchen and I am there, making good coffee slow in a metal pot on the stove, and I have never in my life burnt my tongue. I have just taken scones out of the oven. You ask cream first or jam, and I say yes. I tell you, Constable called clouds messengers, and you act like it's the first time. The soil here is perfect for anything, and on my old Game Boy Advance. You are wearing a dress I made for you. Its deep pockets, open mouth with flowers you've picked for me on your way home from chopping firewood, mending birdhouses. And we live happily ever after, like wishbones coughed up by the sun. This next poem is also from my earlier residency, but I can't really say that I wrote this poem. I would say it's more of a curated poem. It's a poem I curated, stitched together, nicked from other people. So we ran a project called A Poem for Petersfield by Petersfield, where we asked members of the public to donate a line or two that they've written themselves about Petersfield, their impression of Petersfield, how they felt about Petersfield, their favourite memories, their favourite places, and various associations. And from that, I stitched together a poem. So, like I said, I didn't really write it. We're going to be running this project again. It launched this weekend, so there should be a round, or if not, I will make sure some get handed out, some slips for you guys to very kindly, as I'm sure you will, donate a line or two to the next poem that I will then pass up as my own. If you're looking for any inspirations to what you might say about Petersfield, here is the poem for Petersfield by Petersfield that came from my previous residency, and it's called Petersfield Is. Petersfield is sushi from Waitrose, bluebells in a silent wood, gladiator camp at Petersfield Rugby Club. Petersfield is a duck, a moorhen, a Harris's hawk, wood pigeons, Egyptian geese herding spotty goslings, a family of badgers, and also a little baby badger jogging. There's lots of dogs. Petersfield is a number of hidden gems. The Physic Garden, a green door on St. Peter's Road, the Hangers, a square to share. Petersfield is leafy streets with Chelsea tractors, courtyard coffee, when the lake froze over in 1994. Petersfield is the beauty of the lake at dawn, all ages, at their own pace. Southern skyline once unwooded, standing where the ancients stood, Petersfield is watched over by buzzards and red kites, welcoming in every direction. Thank you, and I'm going to finish on one last poem from my Edward Thomas and Helen Thomas sonnet sequence. This is called Cento, and again it's a poem that I've nicked from other people. Each line in this poem is a line taken from the work of Edward and Helen Thomas. So the first line is from Edward, the second line is from Helen, and I've sort of I basically went through and farmed their work for my favourite lines, favourite quotes and phrases, and have turned it into a little bit of a found poem, and it's called Cento. The past is the only dead thing that smells sweet, the only dream that enters the deep sleep of lovers to unteach what the fox so well expressed, a soft wind as of ushering voices. I tasted deep the hour I first learnt to distinguish trees, the thick perfume of so many leaves, like a hand opened, forgiving. It's the turn of lesser things, I suppose. Some beautiful effect of clouds or of smoke, the windmills in the flat meadows by the sea below, a shallow bowl of white violets. If it weren't for these things, I shouldn't be really alive. These days of sun and peace are delicious.
Thank you, Ellora. I think your poetry is delicious as well. I do just have to say that all those poems, those sonnets, are in this little booklet, and added to it are there's a bit of prose from Ellora as well, explaining and drawing the background to why she wrote what she wrote and what inspired her. And we've also got, because part of her residency was immersing in the work of Flora Tort as well, the artist. So there's a section of poems with the Flora Tort paintings alongside. So it's a beautifully curated piece of work, and I'm really grateful to Ellora and the museum team for allowing us to put that together. That letter you read at the beginning, I could feel the poetry in that. And it's, wow. Thank you very much. And I'm now pleased to introduce Jessica Mookerjee, who is a poet with a Bengali origin, born in England, raised in Swansea, and living most of her life in London and Kent. She has degrees in anthropology and socio-ecology. Although she is widely published in journals and anthologies such as Agenda, The North, The Rialto and Magna, she also has a day job, working in public health in Kent. I don't know how you do it all. Jessica is the author of 3 collections of poetry: Flood, published by Culture Drama, and Tigress, published by Nine Arches Press. And her latest book, Notes from a Shipwreck, published again by Nine Arches Press. Jessica is also author of several poetry pamphlets, her latest called Playlists, published by Broken Sleep Books. Twice been highly commended for Best Single Poem in the Forward Prize. Her book Tigress was shortlisted for the Ledbury Month Prize for Second Collections in 2021, and I'm delighted to welcome Jessica.
I was just saying to Ellora, she's got a great name. It's a name that you think's already definitely. I'm happy, quite happy with that. I'll also be happy to be, look like you as well. You all round. And it's just been great to be here to read. I'm going to read a poem from Tigress, just to kick off, because I like your poem about the British Empire. So I'm just going to echo the sentiments. This is about my parents, who and then becoming British, which I witnessed actually. Becoming British. They scramble in drawers for affidavits, letters, proof of purchase, receipts, invoices, voices. Her father was a district judge, Kulna division, amidst more shouting. Letters. We need proof of legitimacy of your marriage. Headlines. National worries of smuggling in foreign women. Whispers. Her father is a stateless person. His affidavit. Worthless. He fled from Bengal during the riots to Dehradun. What colour is her passport? In a suitcase under her saris, she strokes her wedding jewels. Old blue airmail letters from her father. You'll bring shame on both our families if you don't marry. Must be somewhere. The vows, she said, under the stars, garments tied in flesh red and bone white. We need proof of legitimacy of your marriage. In Kushtia, under the pole star, circling fire and incense smoke, eternity stamped to the priest's thumb, a kick from God. All papers lost. And one of the things I love about Edward Thomas is because, we all, and, Ted, you said he was the father of Sword in the end. I sort of would love him to be my father. And his sort of Welshness is something that I kind of pick up on. I like that. This is my poem about, I think, everyone who's Welsh, everyone who's from a kind of Bangladeshi origin, or anyone who's got this migratory sort of sense, is a sort of roaming soul, I feel, and we're looking for home. And that's, for me, very Edward Thomas. And this is a poem in Tigris called Song of the Soil. And anyone with any Welsh connection will know Calon Lan is a pure heart. It's a very important song for anyone Welsh. And Jaya Hay is just an Indian refrain, which just means hey, victory to me. Song of the Soil. Waterlogged, overtaken by tides, swamped clay, sinking in soil that makes me homesick. I sing Calon Lan. Near an estuary, I think I see paddy fields growing in Llanryddion marsh. I paint my face with mud, feet squelch in grass, shoeless as my past, with a suck of earth. What she's singing in her inconsolable hum. On the bank of the Hooghly, a thin man dressed in white rags took the ground in his hands and made a bird-shaped flute with the wind's tongue. Indecipherable places where these voices come. Calon honest, Calon Lan. Sand and mud in his diphthongs. Her vowels, more steady, boiled in a sinking city. Jai, Jai. She sang me a nation's anthem. I didn't understand. Just the kiss of her voice, quieter than my brave Welsh hymn. I had a very similar sort of thing to Daljit actually about the end. I had an idea that my mum had sang me a lullaby when I was little, and when the internet came on in the world, I thought I'm going to Google this. What is this strange lullaby that my mum used to sing to me? And I sort of tagged it in. It's the Indian national anthem. And the minute it came up, I burst into tears because I just thought, oh, all right. Just the sort of confusion of people from all over the place. This is a poem called Outcast, and it's from my book, Notes from Shipwreck, available in all bookstores. Outcast. What do you need to know about this? About the marsh. Naughty person. Outcast. I was no longer a Brahmin girl the day I left on that boat with my mother across the bay from Mumbles to Ilfracombe. I've never seen the sea so hard like salt dunes. Are we in England now? I asked. We used the Severn Bridge after that. I thought it was the Howrah Bridge. I was sick on my mother's lap. They took me there after the war. They say I must not cross the sea. My father called me Badmash the day I stole his checkbook, says I'm no Brahmin girl. No, even before that, when I took money from her purse to buy my sister's Christmas presents from the shops up the road. Wrapped them, toys, in cheap tissue paper and ribbons, told them they were from Santa, rigged up bells. They said I must not steal from a Brahmin. I was not a Brahmin girl. When I told all the Welsh kids at school I was from India, not England, they were eased, having learnt the sins of the English from their fathers. But in my heart, I knew I was born in Luton. They say I must not bear false witness with respect to land. The Dharma Sutra says to become pure, I must fast, bathe at dawn, noon and dusk. I must stand all day and sit all night. I have never done these things. I am unruly, always standing and sitting at the wrong times and eating crisps. The Dharma Sutra requires I do these rituals for 3 years in order to return home. It takes a long time, I think, to realise that if you come from a sort of heritage that is not British, well, maybe all of us actually in some ways, we can carry a lot of shame about class, we can carry a lot of shame about where we're from. And when I was a kid, I was always very ashamed that my mother ate with her hands. I found it sort of weird, and I remember my grandmother telling me off actually when I was in India because I insisted on eating with a fork and knife. And she said, "Oh, Memsa." And I just, and it took me a lot of time. And then I found this, putting together this collection, I found this amazing kind of Ayurvedic rhyme, which I put in here, about the health benefits of eating with your hands. This is called Eating with Hands. Through the thumb comes space, through the forefinger comes air, through the mid-finger comes fire, through the ring finger comes water, and through the little finger comes earth. The knives and forks are gossiping about us as we silently put them in places out of harm's way. They notice the tiger and its too big grin barge in. Know that it'll devour everything. So they sigh, lie flat and dry and untouched by us in their sharp and shiny way. Because the tiger's teeth are masters of severing. It prowls cupboards, goes through the bread bin, the fridge barely glancing, places weight where we put the meanings of our rhymes, where we empty vast slop buckets as it pisses and catches its hair on every sharp corner with daily duties. They clatter and clink about us, say, that man can't rouse his wife or give those kids proper advice, just fights and bickers, pulls each implement out and argues about how to wash and sharpen them. They say the tiger doesn't need them. Knives and forks are cowards, and like the teacups, fragile, held trembling between her fangs. So through my book, I try to give a nod to The Tempest as well, because I like that play very much. But also Miranda in The Tempest, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but she's sort of the girl, isn't she? And I try to give her a bit of energy in this, and so I sort of pull out what I would like Miranda to have said. So this is called A Prayer to be Said at Sea in a Storm. So I, offer that you also can say this if you're on a boat. It knocks through my chest in its hunger to be owned by you. What does that? To smash through myself and into your bed, to see you sleep, or be John Donne on a cliff top, flailing at the wind? Will you listen then? Play chess with me, play hide and seek, make believe or simply sing to me. Maybe it's just that a sharp pitch of air grows louder while you are not there. Can I make you into a thou, even if you don't want me? I will carry my limbs and bones all over the world, making you look, slipping into every one of your storms until it turns to laughter, to make the world yours. I will be your breakwater, with fair winds and following seas. I'll be your wife, if you will sail with me. And I want my Eliot Thomas poem. I will read it because I just really like it. It's got the word tempest in it. Rain. Oh. Rain. Midnight rain. Nothing but wild rain. On this bleak hut and solitude and me, remembering again that I shall die, and neither hear the rain, nor give it thanks for washing me cleaner than I have been, since I was born into this solitude. Blessed are the dead that the rain rains upon. But here I pray that none whom once I loved is dying tonight, or lying still awake, solitary, listening to the rain, either in pain or thus in sympathy, helpless among the living and the dead, like a cold water among broken reeds, myriads of broken reeds all still, like me who have no love, which this wild rain has not dissolved except the love of death. If love it be towards that is perfect and cannot, the tempest tells me disappoint. Fathers. I think one of the things that was so poignant about Edward Thomas as well, that he went to war as a sort of middle-aged man, and he was a father, and he was a father to the boys there, and also a father back at the ranch, you know. And my father is a difficult man. He also thinks that the world will drown, and he quite like I said. He said to me, "I'd like to live another." He's 84. He said, "I'd like to live another 50 years." I went, "Oh, for adventures?" And he went, "Oh, God, no." I said, "I want to see Lord Ryan on TV." Difficult. And he doesn't like Father's Day or Father's Day cards. So this is my Father's Day card to him. My father, torn sofa, worn cushions piled high, didn't teach me to swim when I was a child. Me accusing over breakfast, that day the world was hot, you made my life harder. Some again, remembering dusk in a Bengal pond. He was only reaching for dragonflies, as boys do, falling under. He was always talking about those ponds. He took me crying to a library, safety in silence. Hope laid out in front of me, a magician's set of books. Stay safe on an island or stacked on shelves. And later we watched those fantasy films with gorgons, hydras, harpies. Look, he said, look what creatures are in the world. I yelled, it's camera tricks. Proud to dispel his myths, and we laughed. Last month, he began to cook again for his bedridden wife, like he did 30 years ago. That first time she was taken to hospital, her voices threatening to poison us. Last month, on a cursory visit, on my sister's insistence, I noticed he hadn't cleaned the house. It's an illusion, he told me. I won't bother, because the dirt always returns. Reading the Upanishads, he sits in his priority seat in the living room, the only place you can see the TV, where he ignores the world, even though he wants to live to see it drown, and watch all the creatures sink into the earth. Today, It's Father's Day, and I have sent no card to thank you for what you did and didn't do. My last poem is called The Painter of Modern Life, again from notes from Shipwreck, and that'll be the end, and I'll pass on to The Painter of Modern Life, and lockdown. I don't want to re-traumatise you all. Inside my television, where the Chinese artist smashes a house down, serves the people crab as a mark of respect, a dissident joke we don't get in the West. I pretend to read Baudelaire, my bookshelf, a delight these days, but admit to who will care. I'm on Facebook and TikTok. The children, scared as I once was, throw charades of brave and fierce shapes. They don't know what's new, lost or gained. I share the space and ask the man I'm locked down with, back in the day when we wore such beautiful clothes, were we stranger then or just the same? He answers, we no longer exist. And smeared with bleak extremes of shame, listen to the street clap and wring their hands. Now the artist, man of the world and man of crowds, are pixels made of light and words. The papers aren't printed and don't say anything anyway. We watch the news every day and stare at death on the television. And I walk for an hour in an ever-growing careless tide. The bluebells are wilder this year than ever. He's so busy piecing it together in America, on YouTube. I try to tell him about bluebells. I mute meetings in Zoom and pretend to be on important calls. Crowds are no longer our domain. I think it'll blow over. I lie. He can't listen as I reach for utopia, a new Jerusalem where no one drinks or smokes. He says, what about Africa? What about your family in India? My aunt sends flowers on WhatsApp. Show your father the tulsi in our garden. I report back. He doesn't want to see them or speak to anyone. My sister says my mother's fallen so far away. I tell her to call 111 and that helpline they set up at the council. WhatsApp blinks in messages. We went that time to Belumar in 73 after the war, do you remember? Your father met a monk called Jiten, who invited us to eat with him. My Didi, your sister, your parents, my mother. He blessed us because you were from England. How fun. Ask your father. I sent her a picture of the cherry blossom outside my kitchen. No, I don't remember. Show your father the tulsi in our garden. In England, they call it holy basil. I want to become a bluebell. The kids on TikTok make Big Macs, KFCs, Nando's at home, and we watch robots make love on TV. He's dreamt it all before, he says. Perhaps he's Shiva, who dreams of destruction. I've sent away for an effigy of a Norse god. I say little things make all the difference. We change. A virus changes. I see tigers in cages on Netflix, but they're no longer tigers.
Thank you, Jessica. Range of emotions in there, from affidavits at the beginning and I don't know, almost the cruelty that there is in society. It's uncaring in places, but then I love the kiss of her voice. I mean, that's so Welsh. It really is. Of course, Edward Thomas was considered himself 5/8 Welsh.
So wise.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I claim it by default because my gran lived in Porthcawl, and I grew up on a diet of Welsh rugby at the beginning of the 1970s, so the glory years. That's what I remember. But moving on, just moving a little bit west of Wales to Ireland, I'm really thrilled to welcome Michael Longley to join us today. What Born in Belfast, Michael is an award-winning Irish poet who is a contemporary of Seamus Heaney and Derek Mann. What a trio that was. An influential figure, he's worked as Director of Literature and the Traditional Arts for the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. In 2001, he was awarded the Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry, and this year has been awarded the most prestigious Feltrinelli International Prize for Poetry. Awarded once every 5 years, previous winners include W.H. Auden, Eugenio Montali, and John Ashbery. His latest poetry collection is The Slain Birds, with a cover designed and drawn by his artist daughter, Sarah, who I know both Michael and Edna are very proud of. Sorry if I've stolen that from you, Michael. He often makes links between the world of Homer and other classical authors and the contemporary reality of life in Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, particularly in terms of conflict, revenge and reconciliation. The focus on conflict in his poetry is, however, counterbalanced by a lovely close observation and celebration of nature. Michael, we are honoured to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Very generous. And it's lovely to be here. My wife and I, long before we were married, when we were undergraduates at Trinity, we both fell in love with Edward Thomas. And it was partly because of a wonderful teacher called Alec Reid, who was albino and very rotund. And he used to love quoting, "If I should ever by chance grow rich, had by cod and cock ridden in shoulder ditch, roses, peargo and lap water, and left them all to my elder daughter." And then he's been a kind of obsession of my wife's, and she's written at great length, and there's this wonderful book which she did, which is that relates his brilliant prose to his even more brilliant poems. Right. Now, my poems, as I get older, are getting shorter and shorter. in fact, if I'm not careful, they'll disappear forever. And I was telling somebody, if a poem of mine reaches the top of the second page, I feel like going to bed for the afternoon. But I read about 8 or 9 poems, and I would sooner you saved your applause up for a cascade at the end, rather than a gap between poems, because I'm paranoid, and if you get clap clap, and then all of a sudden you read a poem which you might think is your best, and there's no well, I'm going to Edward Thomas's war diary. This extraordinary diary he kept for a few months in not long before he was killed. And I'll begin with 2 poems that bounce off those. The first is a kind of arrangement of things in the diary, and it's called Edward Thomas's War Diary, page 103. Edward Thomas's War Diary, 1st of January to the 8th of April 1917. One night in the trenches, you dreamed you were at home and couldn't stay to tea. Then woke where shell holes filled with blood-stained water, where empty beer bottles littered the barbed wire. Still wondering why there sang no thrushes in all that hazel, ash and dogwood. Your eye on what remained, light spangling through a hole in the cathedral wall, and the little conical summer house among trees. Green feathers of yarrow were just fledging the sods of your dugout when you skirted the danger zone to draw panoramas, to receive larks singing like a letter from home, posted in no man's land, where one frantic bat seemed a piece of burnt paper. And in the war diary, he asks this wonderful question: does a mole ever get hit by a shell? And this is my answer in its short form. Who bothers to record this body digested by its own saliva inside the earth's mouth and long intestine, or thanks it for digging its own grave, darkness growing like an eyelid over the eyes, hands swimming in the soil? And a poem, I suppose I was in my 30s when I wrote those poems. A little bit later, a poem which I've called Edward Thomas's poem, and it was partly inspired by a war poets exhibition in which there were the bits and pieces that were taken from his body when he was killed by a shell blast, although that's now some people disagree, that they say it was a bullet, but in order to soften the blow to Helen, it was described as a shell blast which killed. And this is 8 lines. Edward Thomas's poem. I couldn't make out the minuscule handwriting in the notebook the size of his palm, and crinkled like an origami quim by shell blast that stopped his pocket watch at death. I couldn't read the poem. From where he lay, he could hear the skylark's skyward exultation, a chaffinch to his left fidgeting among the fallen branches, then all the birds of the western front. The nature poet turned into a war poet, as if he could cure death with the rub of a dock leaf. And I loved that letter from Helen, and she had an awful lot to put up with, didn't she, really, you know. I mean, Edward Thomas was many, many things, but one of them, he was a miserable bugger, you know. This is a poem from my new book. Last month to extraordinary silence. We're waiting, folks. And this is a found poem from Helen, her memoir, Under Storm's Wing, you know, beautiful book. And I would rather like to have met her. And I just divided it up. I didn't change a word, I just divided it up. Because it falls into natural lines. And it's about a poet who interests me more and more, Ivor Gurney. Something holy about him. And this, she visited him, he survived the war, and he was a marvellous composer as well as a very, very interesting and challenging poet. and he survived the war, and he was put in an asylum because he was crackers really. And she visited him in the asylum, and she had this brilliant idea. She brought maps from Gloucestershire, and they went over the maps, and he traced all what paths and roads that he had walked with his finger. Oh, it was heartbreaking, really. And this is it. Maps of Gloucestershire, I've called it, after Helen Thomas, a found poem. Ivor Gurney at once spread them out on his bed, and he and I spent the whole time I was there, tracing with our fingers the lanes and byways and villages of which he knew every step, and over which Edward had also walked. He spent that hour in revisiting his home, in spotting a village or a track, a hill or a wood, and seeing it all in his mind's eye, with flowers and trees, stiles and hedges, a mental vision sharper and more actual for his heightened intensity. He trod in a way we who were sane could not emulate, the lanes and fields he knew and loved so well, his guide being his finger tracing the way on the map. It was most deeply moving, and I knew that I had hit on an idea that gave him more pleasure than anything else I could have thought. For he had Edward as companion in this strange perambulation. And then during the heat wave, we could get them in Ireland, you know, once every 10 years. I couldn't sleep, and I filled a bath with cold water and sat on the edge with my feet in it. And I read Ivor Gurney, and I wrote this short poem called Heat Wave. Feet on fire, a bath filled with cold water. I sit on the edge to cool my ankles and insomnia. And in the small hours, I read Ivor Gurney, and I understand his obscurity and muddle. Poems that know more than he knows, more than I know. A Severn-side hedge pools, cloud reflections, face dissolving blood ponds of Patchendale. He washes my feet the way Jesus would. And I'll read the first poem in the new book. There are a couple of stars for this new book. Two of my granddaughters, Amelia and Maisie, they keep cropping up. I don't know why. I mean, when you're 83, the worst thing that happens is losing friends and relatives. But there's this strange compensation of grandchildren, and we have 7. I listen to everything they say, and these 2 girls have given me several poems which are in this. And this is the first poem. It's a kind of a sonnet, and there are a couple of things I need to explain. Smudging is a purification rite, and I refer to Eric Hosking, who's a very great ornithological photographer, and who lost an eye photographing this very, very fierce tawny owl. Tawny owl. At least the motorist who stunned the owl stopped and lifted the body onto the verge, and there Amelia and Maisie found it. A friend will soak the wings in salty water to make shaman fans for smudging rites. Another wants the skull for her collection, and will have to bury it for 1 whole year. Why are there no Tony owls in Ireland? Do you know that Eric Hosking photograph of the Tony that robbed him of an eye? Rage and terror cramped between the branches. Maisie sketches in charcoal its underside. Amelia hugs to herself all the feathers. I will look after you, poor owl, she sighs. Amelia appears fairly soon on page 4. And this is a poem about a model she made of the solar system. I've called it Amelia's model. In her model of the solar system, my 7-year-old cosmologist ties to a barbecue skewer with fuse wire the planets, buttons. For Venus, an ivory button. Mercury, silver beside the sun. Mother of pearl for Jupiter. Red and green for Mars and Earth. For Saturn's rings, a pipe cleaner, so that in the outer darkness close to the kitchen, her brown eyes represent Uranus, Neptune. Amelia, you didn't include Pluto in your wire sculpture of the solar system. Tiny and very far away, an ice world of ice mountains and methane snow, a dance of 5 moons unlit by the sun, the god of the afterlife's kingdom. We shall go there when we die, dear child. And that's slightly more optimistic. Well, you know, you start to think of darker things when you're 83. Yeah. The nice thing about this, about old age, is, and having grandchildren, you're given a title and papa. So in a way, it's like being promoted for doing nothing. Here's a poem about our back garden, and it quotes from the Bible. It's called Solomon's Seal, which is a lovely, elegant white flower that appeared without being planted, because I do no gardening whatsoever. I like wildflowers. Shaded by the self-seeded hazels in a black corner of our garden, to the right of the flowering currant, an unexpected Solomon's seal I want to show you. Does it matter why such graceful bells are so called? Seals of a medieval document. It's May, and Solomon says, "Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. Winter is past, the rain is over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth. A solitary cowslip has survived under our beech, the first grass cutting. The time of the singing of birds is come." There's a great deal to be said for the rifling of. Yeah, I'm a hardened thief. And I read a new poem. And it's a way of saying thank you to my daughter. This is an exquisite drawing of a dead goldcrest, which is even smaller than a wren. Beautiful little bird. and I'm obsessed with birds, and I've called the book after a genius line by Dylan Thomas, for the sake of the souls of the slain birds sailing. And when we were in our teens and early 20s, the poets of my generation, we were all devoted to Dylan Thomas. And then, like everybody else, we went off him. and I have rediscovered him. What a lyric genius. Anyway, this is about this drawing and one which I keep by my bed, of a gold crest which Sarah drew. And I put my wedding ring under it, under the card, every night before I go to bed. Simple little poem. It's more difficult to be simple than to be complicated. I am moved to tears by John Clare. In a way, I am not moved to tears by the Ezra Pound of the cantos. This is just an excuse for a very simple poem. I call it Sarah's Gold Crest. I keep it beside my bed, her watercolour gold crest, fidgety 5 grams, about to flit from among my books and construct a fragile nest. I'm falling asleep in a cup made of moss and feathers held together by cobwebs at the very end of a branch to keep safe eggs and poems. Sarah has drawn a dead gold crest for the cover of my latest book. The gold crest is lying on its back with its shriveled toes up in the air, but its crown feathers are still ablaze. And I'll end with a poem by Edward Thomas, who gets better and better the more I read it.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are about a dozen or 2 dozen of his poems, which I must have read nearly 1,000 times each. And that's what a good poem does, it haunts you. You have to go back, you know. How many novels has one read twice? Yeah, Jean Rhys, 1 or 2 others for me. But by and large, a poem like Tall Nettles, I must have read several hundred times, and it's always new, warm new. You know that poem he has called Words, warm new like an old penny. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about something mysterious, I think, and divine. And he's, what a gift from God his poems are. This is one, it's a very peculiar shape. It's called The Watchers, and it's quite eccentric. I mean, it's more eccentric and strange than anyway. Stop. Yeah, my wife would tell me, I had that look on her face, stop burbling. I could burble all morning.
And we could listen.
Yeah. Well, look, I might read 2. Do we have time? I might read 2 Edward Thomas, because on the same page is Tall Nettles, which is just sacred, holy poem. Anyway, here's this strange one, The Watchers. By the ford at the town's edge, horse and carter rest. The carter smokes on the bridge, watching the water press in swathes about his horse's chest. From the inn, one watches too, in the room for visitors that has no fire, but a view and many cases of stuffed fish, vermin, and kingfishers. Wonderful. Wonderful. Kingfishers rhyming are off rhyming with visitors. Yeah. Thank you very much for this. Is all terrific. And I loved all the poetry this morning. Yeah. It's so strange. One's on one's own writing poems, and I share them with my wife and one or two friends, you know. And then you come into a gathering like this where everyone's either writing it or reading it. You know, it's really quite wonderful. Yeah. So I'll what's wrong?
I just need to crack Jeremy.
Okay, well, it's just to say, lovely to meet you, and a very happy atmosphere in this room, and I feel the presence of Edward Thomas.
And Jeremy.
I once asked Edna's really devoted a great deal of her life to Edward Thomas, and I once asked her if his ghost were to return and stay in our house for a couple of days, and late at night he suggested to her, "Why don't we do elope with me?" What would your answer be? And she said, "Oh, I need time to think about that." Anyway, this is for you in the shade of Edward. Dear lovely. And then I'll sit down if I can move. Oh, there's my walking stick. Yeah. Tall nettles cover up, as they have done these many springs, the rusty harrow, the plough long worn out, and the roller made of stone. Only the elm bud tops the nettles now. This corner of the farmyard I like most, as well as any bloom upon a flower. I like the dust on the nettles, never lost except to prove the sweetness of a shower. Thank you. It's called bodily decrepitude.
That was really special. I don't think I need to say anything. Michael said it all. We do have copies of a few copies of The Slain Birds for sale over in the book fair, just alongside the study centre, along with other books from the written by the poets and so on today. But Michael, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before we go, I am actually expecting a gentleman called Robert Tilliard, who is an artist and poet and all-round turn his hands to anything. He's got a little something to present to me. He's actually, you mentioned the War Diary, and the book. He's produced himself a copy of Edward Thomas's War Diary, which he has interspersed with some of his own photographs and a poem of his, and that was what I was just whipped out of there for. He's just parking his car. So if you want to go and get something to eat or want to wait for it, he'd rather like to present it to me for the Edward Thomas Study Centre, and he can. He's willing, obviously, to take orders for them if you would like them. So hopefully it'll only be a few more minutes, and we can chat amongst ourselves for a few minutes, grab another coffee, cake.
Everyone could read another poem.
Or everyone can read another poem.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
I'll put against it.
Oh, right. Yes.
Fine.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry.